You can't give birth to adults. Every single listing you see on the stock exchange page of the New York Times, listing all those companies, there isn't a single company on those pages that didn't start out with $1,000.
This is the E-Commerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Braintrust. I'm your co-host, Julie Spear. We're going to hear from Carrie in just a little bit as we listen in on an interview that she had recently with the founder of UGG, Brian Smith. It's an extra nice interview for Carrie as Brian hails from the same part of Australia that she does. Brian and Carrie are going to talk about the early days of UGG. And Brian shares some interesting sales data about the first year that UGG was in existence when they sold a mere 28 pairs of boots, a real far cry from the billion-dollar brand and household name that UGG is today. And not only is Brian the founder of UGG, he is the author of the book, The Birth of the Brand. In his conversation with Carrie, you'll hear him share some insights that he includes in his book. And one of the things that he focuses on in their conversation today is the analogy where he compares the life cycle of a new business to human development. And he digs a little bit into how startups are really comparable to infancy, I suppose, complete with even the sleepless nights. And given our focus on this podcast as being a place where we have deep conversations about e-commerce and what it means for brands and how brands can establish themselves in markets like Amazon.com, Brian and Carrie do touch on that topic as well. So why don't we give a listen to Brian and Carrie's conversation about the birth of UGG, and then Brian's take on e-commerce and how brands can set themselves apart and deal with some of the challenges of selling on the internet these days. And then I'll come back and share my takeaways.
So I'm here with Brian Smith, the founder of UGG, and we were just talking before we hopped on the interview about a fairly unique origin that we both have, where we both spent a lot of time in Western Australia, which is kind of unusual because there's only about 2 million people that live in that state. So great to have that connection, Brian, and really great to have you on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So Brian is the founder of UGG and sold that company a little while ago, but I wanted to bring you on the show to talk about your experience growing this company into an internationally recognized brand. And you have some really great stories that you've encountered along the way as a founder in growing this brand and dealing with retailers and dealing with counterfeiters.
Sure.
So I'd like to touch on all of that in today's interview.
In 30 minutes, that's going to be fun.
Let's do it. So the brand that you built, UGG, and this was really quite an origin story that you have. But what's interesting about the story that you share in your speaking in your book is about this iconic brand that you built, but it took you several years to actually figure out how to sell these products that are now really ubiquitous in popular culture. Everyone knows the brand UGG. Everyone knows what an UGG boot is.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it took quite a long time for you to actually break into the consciousness of the public. So I'd love for you to tell the story of how you actually managed to get there.
Well, it started with me as an accountant. After 10 years of studying, I finally graduated and quit the same day because I hated accounting. And I was meditating one day and I had this flash that, wow, all the big brands are coming out of California. So I decided to go to California and see if I could find the next big thing to bring back to Australia. And I was there for several months, mostly surfing every day up at Malibu because that was always my dream. And I made tons and tons of friends up at Malibu on the beach, but didn't find the next big thing until about October. I've been there 3 or 4 months. It was now in October, November. The water was getting cold and the wind was getting chilly. And I remember sitting on the beach pulling on my sheepskin boots that I'd brought from Australia. And I thought, oh, God, there's no UGG boots in America. And that led me to, join up with my buddy. And I said, Doug, we got to go into business. We're going to be instant millionaires. We've all heard that story before. So we got some samples in from a manufacturer and went out on the road. And my buddy Doug went on the road and visited every shoe store in Southern California and came back with no orders. And he said, Brian, they tell me I'm crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California, but I knew that wasn't correct because, Australia's climate's identical and 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear. So being an entrepreneur, you'd have to learn to pivot. And we thought, okay, well, why do all my buddies up at the beach at Malibu think this is the best idea in the world? And it struck me that most of them had been down to Australia surfing on their surf trips and had brought 4 or 5 pairs of boots back for the buddies. So within the surfing community, it was really well known. So we went on the road and hit all the surf shops, and we had like some samples that we'd bought, and all the surf shop retail owners were going, oh my God, that's fantastic. You're going to make a fortune. Those Ugg boots are great. I've got a pair. And this happened in like every surf shop we visited all the way down the coast. So we raised some money, like 20 grand, and bought $15,000 worth of boots. We got 500 pairs in our first order. Yeah. So as soon as the product arrived, we went back on the road to the same surf shops, and they all started saying, well, way to go, Brian, fantastic. But, we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and, flip-flops and we could never sell them out of our store. And like nearly every store we visited said the same thing. And when Doug and I got back to my little house in Santa Monica in LA, we added up all the orders, and the first year's sales of UGG was 28 pairs.
Ouch.
It happened to be exactly $1,000, And, as disappointing as that was, years later, I ended up writing a book about building the UGG brand, after it was in the, the millions. And the theme that I noticed after all those years was that every business is the same. The theme of the book is you can't give birth to adults, right? Every single listing you see on the stock exchange page of the New York Times, listing all those companies, there isn't a single company on those pages that didn't start out with $1,000, right? You have to start somewhere. And the theme of not giving birth to adults is that every business or movement or, sitcom on TV, whatever it is, it starts with someone conceiving it and then taking the first action, which is the birth. And so the birth of UGG was me buying 6 pairs of samples. And then every business or movement just goes into this horrible infancy, and it lies there and it lies there. And there's no amount of, overfeeding or jiggling the cradle or yelling at it. This infant can't get up and go to college. It has to be an infant. And entrepreneurial terms, that's the sad stage where most entrepreneurs give up. They've had this blinding aha and it's going to change the world, and then nothing happens and they think they're failing. But you have to realize that every movement goes through this infancy, and eventually it'll start toddling when you're starting to sell a few products and people are writing articles about you. And that moves pretty fast into youth, where you got consistent orders coming in, sales force is working great, shipping and receiving is fantastic, accounting and customer service is working. And that you can run a really good business, $25, $30 million business in that infancy or in that youth stage. But if it's a really unique product or service like UGG was, it's going to hit the teenage years. And just like we wanted to be at every party in town when we were teenagers, in business you want to be in every big trade show, you want to have national distribution, and it's super dangerous because you can outstrip your capital so quickly. But eventually the accountants come and put all the controls in and it becomes a mature company. So that's the life cycle of every business. And the birth of a brand, my book, is highlights all of the different stages I went through. There are 13 different stages of growing it before I sold it, and eventually went on to become $1 billion for the last 6 years in a row.
Wow. Sort of backtracking a little bit when you talked about the difficulties that you had connecting with your market and actually getting people to understand, what makes a sheepskin boot so special, and actually, what was the turning point that you experienced when you were able to take it from no one really knowing what an UGG boot was to it becoming a very coveted kind of item and brand?
It went in various phases, but the first phase was really interesting because after that first season, I got a summer job. And then so I decided to advertise the next year. And I got these models and posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea here in San Diego. And, perfect hair and clothing and boots and everything. And I ran those ads and the sales went to about $5,000. And that was super disappointing again. So
$5,000 a month.
No, $5,000 for the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, got another summer job. And then the next year I decided, okay, I'm going to get better looking models and a better photographer. And we posed them on the beach again at Wind and Sea and ran those ads. And the sales went to about 10,000, which was super disappointing. And so I got another summer job and I almost decided to quit the business that year. But I was going to, run more ads. And I was talking to one of my surf shop owners and he, I was explaining this problem where I wasn't getting any traction, and he just said, "Oh, shut up, Brian." And he called out the back to all these little kids that hang out in the shop, and these little 12, 13-year-old grommets. So, he says, "What do you guys think of UGG?" And every one of them came out and just went, "Oh, those UGGs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf."
Yeah.
And instantly I realized I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. So pivoting again, I called up a buddy, another Aussie actually, Pete Townend, who was a former world surf champion. And he was running the National Scholastic Surfing Association in Orange County. And I said, "Pete, do you have any young kids who are going to turn pro soon? Because I don't have any money." And he gave me Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. So instead of getting an expensive photographer, I just took my own camera and we went surfing at two iconic spots. One was Black's Beach in San Diego, and the other one was Trestles, or up in San Onofre near, in Orange County. And these are iconic walks. Each walk is about a mile long, and there's fantastic surf at the end. And all the readers of the magazines would have known about these spots. And when I ran the ads that October, November, December, the sales went to $240,000.
Wow, up from 10.
From 10 to 240, and it's purely because I created an image that was so powerful that all the kids wanted to be in the ad. And that was a huge breakthrough for me in advertising and marketing knowledge. And I ended up becoming a student of advertising and marketing, and it became my passion. And that I just continued to do that same theme all the way through. After next year I included skiing and snowboarding. And back in the Midwest of America, nobody surfs or reads surfer magazines. So I started, figured out they all play ice hockey in the winter, and there are more ice hockey players than surfers, So I was able to get young pros in those markets as well and advertise to them. And that theme worked all the way through building the brand into a national business. So it's really important that you never advertise your actual product. You always advertise the benefits or the feeling or the emotional side of the benefit of your product, so that, because that's what people buy. They don't actually buy the product. They buy what it's going to do for them. And every one of these little kids in Southern California was going, "Oh, man, all the cool kids at school have got those UGG boots, I want a pair just like in the magazine, because they wanted to be part of it so strongly." So that was a big, the first turning point was that introduction into the surf market.
It's such a great point, and I love that you bring up that you need to connect with people on an emotional level and sell a lifestyle and sell the emotion, because what we do with clients at Bobsled is work in a very, very saturated market on Amazon, and there are, last estimate I saw, 500 million products on Amazon. And granted, a lot of those are going to be variations, but there's a sea of products on Amazon. And the only way that you can really set yourself aside from competitors, and also Amazon themselves, who are releasing lots of private label products, is to have a brand and really stand for something.
Exactly.
And I just think one purchase I've been considering recently, I have a toddler, and I've been thinking about getting one of these mini scooters.
Yep.
I saw them all around New York when I was just there, and I know that those scooters are $70. There are definitely going to be $30 scooters out there, but I want the $70 one because That's what I've seen. That's what, there's a really good brand around that product. I know that it's made really well.
Yep.
And they are selling the lifestyle as well. They're selling the fact that you can get your kid outside and active, and, that this thing isn't going to break, that they're going to be able to ride this for 3 years and you could give it to their sibling.
Mums they want to get, they're buying the freedom for the kid, not the actual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love that you bring that up. It kind of parlays into my next question, which is around copycats and counterfeiters and all that sort of shady side, people who can't come up with an inventive business idea of their own. So you did, even quite early on, once you achieved some degree of success, you had copycats coming in. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, every Australian started hearing I was doing great in the US, so they started trying to come in and take part of the market. And you can imagine, you can't patent shoes, or shoe designs, because they've been around for thousands and thousands of years, and there's really nothing new.
Right.
And so the best thing I did was register the UGG trademark when I first started. And the company was built around that brand. The value of the entire business when I sold it was how much is the brand worth. They didn't give a damn about all the products because they'd changed so many times over the years. It was all about the brand. So what we did in the beginning, we had a mantra at UGG with every employee, and that was, don't obsess about your competitors. Get out first and run faster, right?
Love it. Yeah.
Get out first and run faster. And to put that in real terms is that, we'd go to a trade show in March and we'd have a brand new set of styles and colors, right? Well, half the people walking by had cameras and they were taking photographs of all our stuff. So at the next trade show, they'd come out with everything we'd just done.
Yeah.
But we, in anticipation, knowing that they were going to do that, we'd come out with a completely new set of styles and colors. And so every season we were always ahead by a year. And that's the beauty of being a good entrepreneur. You know where you're going, but the other people can only see where you've been. Mm-hmm. That's really important. If you believe in something and you've got creativity, you can always stay ahead of your competitors by just bringing on the new line and not just resting on that, but continually improving, continually doing R&D and trying to make your product better.
It's a really great point. There's only so many dimensions that you can compete on, and your competitors were really doing the copycat thing, maybe trying to compete on price.
That's right.
But if you're the market leader, then you want to stay the market leader, you always need to be ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, we were always tempted to reduce our prices to match them, but we never did. And I'm really glad in retrospect. Because by being more expensive, just like with your $70 scooter, there's a value implication there. And if we had dropped our price to meet all the others, we would have just become a crappy product like the rest of them.
Yeah, well, one other thing that you've mentioned previously is the kids, who were a big demographic of yours by the sounds of it. They didn't, if their mum went and bought the knockoff, they weren't happy about it. They wouldn't wear them. So
we were selling in surf shops, and when I ran those ads, all the kids are telling their moms, "Hey, Mom, I want a pair of Uggs for Christmas." Well, the moms had no idea they were a surf shop item, so they started walking the malls, and I'd had very little success getting into the mall stores, right? Mm-hmm. This one year, thousands and thousands of moms are walking around all the shoe stores in the malls going, "Do you have Ugg boots?" "No, never heard of them." "Do you have Ugg boots?"
Oh, that's the best marketing ever.
Yeah, what are they? And so eventually, we got into retail by backdooring it because the surf market took off so strong. I got a great story about that. I was in the buying office of Montgomery Ward in Chicago, which was a huge mall department store retailer, big in shoes. And I gave my best sales pitch ever. And the buyer just looked at me and said, "Brian, why are you here?" And I said, "Because I want to get an order for the California stores." And he goes, "Brian, don't you get it? We're the elephants. We don't move until the mice are running around under our feet." And I instantly knew what he meant. Until all the specialty stores were just blowing out, the big mall stores weren't going to take a risk. And so we were really lucky that it was going crazy in all the surf shops, and the malls sort of got hit from behind.
Right. That's really interesting. I think a lot of our audience can relate to that if they have experience working with large retailers. And there's a slightly different context now in that a lot of retailers they're either following Amazon's lead. So I know that buyers at Target, for example, I know that in those buying meetings, they'll often like look up a product, look up a brand on Amazon and see, are people buying this online? Are there good reviews? Is there traction? And then there's other retailers like Sephora, for example, where they try and build as much exclusivity in as possible, and they don't actually want their brands to be selling on Amazon. So the point that you made about, that's part of your phases of childhood to adulthood as a brand, and that they were saying you're too young for this, basically.
That's right, yeah.
So now that we're sort of in this internet age and we're talking about Amazon, and that was a platform that wasn't around when you were running UGG, but how have you seen things change in the internet age?
Well, the interesting thing is that the principles of marketing and sales have not changed in 100,000 years, right? But the methodology now is so different. My first orders were sent by telex machine, which probably nobody's ever heard of. Then we moved to faxes, and that was like this amazing breakthrough in speed and technology. And now you can't even find a fax machine because it's all it's either internet, emails or social media marketing.
Unless you're dealing with a US government department of some kind.
Yeah. So the thing now is you have to think much faster and react much quicker, because it goes so fast. But the principles haven't changed. I work with a client very closely, and your listeners might be interested to write this website down. It's called thesashbag.com, SASH. And it's a lamb leather shoulder bag that is just unique in the way it's designed to hold everything that's in the big handbag, but it fits so close to your body, and you wear it like apparel. And my belief is it's going to be the fanny pack of the next decade or two, right? It's potentially that big. It's like another UGG-style product. The utility is so good, and the product is so good. And what she's done that's so clever is that when the first several years, nobody got a bag shipped to them without a week later getting a phone call saying, hey, how's your bag? Did you like how's the color? Happy with the quality? And her customer service, even though it was bought with a click from a website, the customer service was so powerful that she has built this raving fan group. She had to make a group, and now the group's all subdivided into, VIP groups and product development groups, and they're all volunteers that come every time before she launches anything. She asks for input from this group, and it's about just what they call them sash sisters now. It's like, in fact, they're having a sash bash next March in San Diego, and people are flying in from Canada and New York and everywhere to San Diego just because they want to be part of the sash sisterhood. And it's unbelievable how that customer care, even though it was bought with a click, has been turned into a bunch of raving fans. And just to expand on that, 3 months ago, we did another Kickstarter campaign because we're doing a new style of bag. And we raised $1.1 million on Kickstarter, and 80% of the people who bought had never heard of Kickstarter, right? So they were all these raving fans, right? So that's how powerful your existing market is. And so even though it's, the internet is very impersonal in a lot of ways, you must be able to reach out through that electronic system and connect one-on-one with your customers, because once they become a fan, God, anything's possible.
That's a really great story. And there's lots of good examples of making connections like that through, even though people are buying things online, through product inserts and phone calls. Like you said, if you can build that personal connection, you're much more likely to build retention, build referrals, things like that.
Yeah, if you don't do it, you'll just have an average business. Yeah.
So I know that it's the 40th anniversary of UGGs, and your first book, which came out in 2014 about building a powerhouse brand, is you're relaunching it soon, right?
Yeah, in fact, on the 30th of October, I have a big ad coming out in Inc. magazine, and we're launching mostly the audio version. I just read the book
Okay.
a couple of months ago, which was a lot of fun. I thought, okay, this is my chance to change the book and update it and do all this stuff. And guess how many words I changed? 0.
Really? Wow.
As I'm reading it, I'm going, my God, this is still absolutely current. There's not a thing that needs changing. Anything I could do to update it wouldn't be anything new because it all happened in that 18 years that I ran the company.
Right.
And so I just read the existing book, and it turned out to be fantastic. So on October the 30th, go to Amazon and look for The Birth of a Brand. That's The Birth of a Brand, and buy either the hard copy or the audio because it's a roadmap for every entrepreneur. And even though it's aimed at entrepreneurs, when I speak from the stage, I speak to a lot of huge audiences full of CEOs and executives who have been around for 25, 30 years. And they love it because they go, oh, my God, I remember that. Oh, my God, he's done exactly what I did, And so there's a lot of familiarity for every reader. And almost, everybody tells me it's a really fast read. And I think that's because they're never sure I'm going to be around next chapter because I don't just talk about all the bullshit about how I was great at this and great at that. I go through all the disasters that I went through. And that's where people really relate. And new entrepreneurs coming in will get a lot of heart out of the fact that they're not the only ones that seem to be failing,
What a great story. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Brian, and sharing a little bit of that. We'll definitely link up to the book in the show notes so people can check that out.
Okay, thanks.
Again, it's called The Birth of a Brand by Brian Smith.
Excellent. Yeah, well, listen, I'd love to come on again sometime. So good luck to all of you entrepreneurs and business people out there. As I say in my book, every time I say it, when I sign one, I just say, enjoy the ride, because that's what it's all about.
As only a surfer can say. Thanks again, Brian. Great to talk to you, and all the best with the launch of the audiobook as well.
Thanks so much, Kerry. Have a good one.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed listening to Kerry's conversation with Brian. I know I really did. I love hearing any successful businesses story about their early days. I'm always inspired by the level of just stick to it and the level of innovation that's at play in order to make a business work. You can't go in with a model and with an idea of how things are going to play out and expect that things play out right to the letter of the plan that you have. And Brian's story really shows how he was willing to continually go back to the drawing board and make adjustments to make it work, and make it work he did. One of the things that really stood out to me, given again that our focus here is about brands and selling on e-commerce, one of the things that really stood out to me about Kerry and Brian's conversation was the point where Brian talked about the turning point for UGG. They had slowly growing sales over the course of a few years and had engaged in an advertising strategy with what he thought were the best images to draw in customers. And when Kerry asked him about the turning point, Brian identified that it was the point when he really listened to who the audience was, who he was targeting and what they were looking at and what they wanted. And then he developed an advertising campaign that included images that spoke to that audience. That was the turning point from him. And that to me echoed many of the points that in the conversation that Kerry had recently with Lexi Cross from Shoes Of. Really in this world of e-commerce where there are so many brands bringing their products and a lot of similar products to the table, it's so challenging for brands to set themselves apart from all the options out there for customers. And it comes down to a brand really being clear on who they are. What is the value that they add? What's the story of their brand? And how do they really convey that and connect with their customers? Lexi really drove that point home. And I think Brian's story about the turning point for UGG just underscored that even further. That in this day and age of inundation of products on the market on e-commerce, that really being clear on your brand story and having your advertising reflect that story and how the customer can be a part of it is really key to success. And another thing that stood out to me was the conversation that Carrie and Brian had about how you deal with copycats in a market that's flooded with products. And sometimes a strategy can be you compete on price. And what that can look like is the race to the bottom. The cheapest price will get the clicks, we'll get the add to cart, and we'll get the sale. And I appreciated Brian's stance that there is really a value implication that comes along with pricing. That sometimes the higher price carries with it the implication that this is the higher quality product. And I think we can all think back on our own purchasing habits and identify instances where we opted for the higher priced item because we did apply a value with that price point. We did apply the view that that product had a higher base of quality because of the pricing. And Carrie even related her own instance there with looking for the scooter for her toddler. So I think that the idea, a point for consideration for brands as they're looking to get their foothold in competitive markets is you have to analyze your competitive environment. You have to do competitor analysis to see how your competitors are pricing their products. But jumping to the strategy of going for the lowest price is not necessarily always the way to go, and that it's important to understand your own product value and embrace the value implication that comes along sometimes with the higher price point. So those were just a couple of my key takeaways from today. Really enjoyed listening in on the conversation. I hope you did as well. Thank you to Brian for being a guest on today's episode, and thank you to all of you for joining us in the conversation. We'll catch you next week for another episode of the E-Commerce Braintrust. Bye.